Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here once again. And I want to just start off by congratulating Jane on 20 years. There she is. And, she was actually a founding director of BlinkLab and did a terrific job. So I thank her for that and thank the team from JMM as well for putting on another fantastic lunch. So I want to start off with a little story and I don't want to get emotional about it, but there was an incident that occurred late last year in Perth. And I'm a Perth boy, and I'm really proud, actually, Jason would talk about healthcare today. Well done, Jason. I'm actually at the Techno Invest conference, which is being held in Sydney tomorrow, and I would say about half the companies there are actually healthcare companies, and that's incredible, and I think the same thing is again here today. But my story is something that happened in Mosman Park, which, for those that know Perth, know that's one of the blue chip suburbs in Perth, and we had a horrible incident where a family with two autistic boys and two professional couple, and they decided to end their lives because these two boys, I guess, were too much of a hassle for them, despite the enormous amount of gratuity that the government gives to people on the NDIS. And I remember seeing that story, and of course the first thing my wife said, which is, there's no way the mother had anything to do with this family suicide. And by the way, they included the two dogs and the cat as well. But it was a horrific incident. I know it made news around Australia. But I thought, why is this happening? We're spending $40-odd billion on the NDIS. It's almost as much as we spend on defence for this country. And that's only for a very select few group of people that receive these benefits. And now the wisdom of our federal government's decided to try and cut this back. And I would be horrified to think that there might be more incidents of this occurring where a family decides that they just simply can't cope with their family being affected by the stigma of autism. What's interesting is the two boys actually went to the same school that my son went to. And the older boy was more autistic than the younger boy. And I found out through some investigation that, in fact, the older boy was diagnosed late, whereas the younger boy was diagnosed relatively early. And so the older boy was far more difficult, and I'm sure that was probably a major catalyst. And so what we're talking about here is early diagnosis leads to early intervention, leads to far better outcomes when it comes to problems in neurological conditions like autism or ADHD. And so that is where BlinkLab comes in, because we're talking about a psychiatric disorder which is completely subjective in the way that it's diagnosed. And that means that a psychiatrist has to review you, analyse you, give you a scorecard based on questionnaires and subjectively diagnose you with autism or ADHD. And the problem with that is that it takes years, because families are concerned and their parents know if there's something wrong with their child, and they know that the parents are competitive. As a parent, I know myself, my kid's doing so well in school, he knows maths tables and ABCs and reads and writes and so forth, and my kid's not. And then maybe my kid might have a problem. So there's all this sort of problems where you get exponentially growth, where parents want to know the answer. And so they go to their GP. The GP doesn't know because they're not a specialist in that field. They have to upscale it to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist wants to do the job, but there's only so many of them, and there ends up being years and years long wait time. And this leads to this late diagnosis. And late diagnosis leads late intervention, poor outcomes. Certainly a poor outcome for that family. And I'd hate to see that happening again. So what BlinkLab have got is an objective tool. It's the world's first. It uses a smartphone, and it's providing stimuli through the screen of the phone, and also using the audio component, and more importantly, the forward-facing camera to analyse your face and look for a facial reflex response. And that response, measured in milliseconds, can determine a neurological disorder. And that's what we've developed. It came out of Princeton University. My managing director, Hank Yambole, is a professor at Princeton in psychiatry, and unfortunately he's not here. He's actually in Melbourne. Actually, I should tell you, the reason why he's in Melbourne today is because Channel 7 is filming an exclusive nationwide story on BlinkLab tomorrow. And that will be aired, I don't know, be at the end of this week or certainly next week. So you will be hearing, and the whole nation will be knowing about BlinkLab next week when that story airs. So let's just say, for example, we're all sitting here quietly listening to me, and then we were interrupted by a fire alarm. And that fire alarm sends off that loud beep that we're not anticipating. Every single person in this room is going to blink. That's what will happen. But when the second beep comes, maybe half the people in the room blink, the other half don't. And by the third beep, maybe no one's blinking. Now, that is a phenomenon called pre-pulse inhibition, and we haven't invented that, but we're exploiting that phenomenon, which has been studied for decades. If you take a soft sound and you put it in front of a loud sound, then something interesting happens. A neurotypical person, which I assume everyone in this room is, and it's probably not, in fact, probably accurate, but let's say that we are. Soft sound in front of a loud sound, milliseconds apart, sounds like one beep, it's actually two. A neurotypical person does not blink, but an autistic or ADHD individual does. And it doesn't matter regardless of age. We've taken that phenomenon and put it into a smartphone. Now, does it work? So with the thanks of our shareholders, and have been very supportive, we just raised $17.5 million earlier this year, which is a pretty damn decent raise at a massive premium to our listing price. And we have the funds to continue this FDA clinical trials, but we did a large study of 485 kids in the United States, and we demonstrated 85% sensitivity specificity in comparing to a formal diagnosis by a psychiatrist using only our smartphone technology on these randomized double-blind clinical trials. Now, our share price absolutely rocketed on the back of that. When we were a 20-cent IPO, we went to $1.15. Okay, profit taking brought us down to the 80s, and then I wanted to raise some money. We had a very big raise that was led by Alpine, Westar, and Morgans, and we now got clinical research from Morgans, which is something I'm very proud of. And now I know the share price is sitting around 65 cents today, but let's face it, we've got a war going on, but this company's got over $20 million in the bank. And that's important because we've got all the funds we need to get FDA approval. And FDA approval is what we want because that's what will commercialize this technology, or even more importantly, lead to an acquisition. Now, there's something that really excites me, and that's really just a prelude to really what I wanted to tell you about. We will be, within days, announcing the results of our double-blind clinical trial in Europe on ADHD. Now, we haven't talked about ADHD, even though it's been in the company announcements, in terms of the headline on the front page, diagnosis of autism and ADHD. I don't think there is a single cent value in our current share price attributed to the opportunity in ADHD. But ADHD is a far bigger market opportunity, 5 or 6 times larger. But more importantly, there are a whole class of drugs approved to treat ADHD. And you would have heard of them, dexamethamphetamines, Ritalin, and so forth. All the big pharmas are all competing in a highly, purely competitive market for essentially the same amphetamine-type product to treat ADHD. It's worth billions and billions of dollars. I was actually speaking to an executive from a big pharmaceutical company only 2 weeks ago, asking me when are we going to be releasing these ADHD results. I'm not saying who it is, but it is a fact. We will be releasing these results within days. It is a double-blind trial. I don't know the outcome, but I'm optimistic, just like we demonstrated with autism, that we will show that we can diagnose ADHD from a smartphone just by looking at you. Now, this is a tremendous market opportunity because if you want to be acquired, and I very much do want to see an acquisition for my company, just as I did with my previous company, ResApp Health, which was acquired by Pfizer for $200 million from a market cap of $7 million when I floated that company. We need to have a drug to be that the big pharmas can see, all right, if we own the diagnostic tool that allows us to be able to sell more drugs, which is the business that big pharma is in, then we can see an opportunity to acquire this company and roll out that technology. Now, I'm not saying that in autism there's not a huge opportunity. The difference is that autism is all about behavioural intervention. There's no drugs involved. It's important, and there's a massive market opportunity for GPs and psychiatrists to roll it out and be able to diagnose early. But if we can also add the ADHD opportunity to that, now we're talking about a huge potential value in this company that will be unleashed. And I'm certain that people like Jason will be very happy to write about that based on the back of the outcome of this trial, which I don't know what it is, but I'm optimistic. So that is really the key message from this presentation today. I figure you're all pretty familiar with BlinkLab as a whole anyway, because I've presented here a number of times. But I am excited about the ADHD opportunity, and I'm also excited about something else, which is this. We're using a smartphone to diagnose a neurological condition objectively. Digital biomarkers and how your face reacts to a stimuli. That's never been done before. We can open ourselves up as a platform technology. That means that we can potentially diagnose all kinds of neurological conditions, be it depression or dementia and so forth. Now that requires far more expensive clinical trials that this little company can possibly afford at this point in time. But that is the reason why Big Pharma or Big Tech comes along and says, yeah, we'll have that, because we can then bring in our people and we can provide our unlimited resources to open up that. And I can tell you what, if you could have, say, a diagnostic tool for depression, what would that be worth? And I already know that the diagnostic tool for ADHD and autism is in a multi-billion-dollar market in of itself. So right now the market cap's about $100 million. I'm very proud of that. I started the company with a market cap of 15 only less than 2 years ago. And we have done everything that we said we would do. And that's very important. As the founder of 7 companies on the ASX in healthcare, and I've delivered greater returns than maybe anyone else in my industry, I want you to know that BlinkLab is the one. And I'm very excited about it. We've done everything that we said we would do. We're completely funded to deliver on everything that we say we're going to do. And I'm optimistic that we do it in the time frame. Wait for these results to come out. I'll certainly be waiting in great expectation for it. And I appreciate your time and thank you for having me.